And for Lyle to do that, yeah, but for Lyle to do that at 87 years of age, I don't think anybody will ever see this moment again. And I do mean that, Lyle.
Yeah.
You have done something there that nobody else can do.
Will be hard to top.
Well, listen, Lyle, I've also got to say, I don't know if Danielle's around, but this show could not be put together without the two of them. Lyle and Danielle both brought something to the table. Lyle brought his collection, and Danielle brought
the organization.
Dana, yes, she did. She brought all her energy, her spirit, everything. She is like a truck. She has more energy than a truckload of Duracell batteries. She just keeps going and going and going. And I don't know if Danielle's around, but if she is. Yeah, okay, where is Danielle?
I think she's not outside.
Let's give Danielle a big round of applause, please. Lyle says she's outside smoking a joint.
No.
All right.
I maybe should be, but I was not doing that.
Well, anyway.
No, but she's a goddamn fun.
Well, listen, you both brought something to the table, and it's good that you did that because you're touching 87 years of age, like I say, and Danielle's got the energy and the, you know.
Well, no, she's got the organizational ability. She's got a connection with the fine art world. She's like cha-cha-cha. So
I was going to get to that one.
Joe is predator.
Yeah. And I'm really honoured and pleased that I was invited to come over here, and it's been lovely.
I didn't pay you to say that.
In our
Are you with
squad.
20 later?
So anyhow,
All right.
is it?
Thank you.
I'd like to see people that. Well, I'm sure you're here because you're interested in it, and there's not. Some of the art, not all of the artwork is George Burchett, because it's Hayakawa over there, some
AJ
Japanese.
Akamatsu, you have? AJ Akamatsu, and there's some William Fisher there. And this stuff here, in my opinion, but I'm not 100% sure, but this guy here, Lyle, is that Bob Devine from the north of England at the back?
Well, these are traveling books that,
Yeah, I think that's Bob Devine.
up until after the turn of the century, of the last century, between 1800 and 1900, was most tattooers were itinerant. They were sailors, they were vagabonds, they were with outdoor entertainment and things like that. And so they hadn't settled down when in the storefronts. So they traveled with books and flesh. And these books are nothing but sales aids. Present to your customer of what your wares are. So that's what these traveling books are. And they can fold up and travel easily. Yes, you used to use those.
Well, I know that at one time Alone and I owned a George Burchett book that had traveling flash in it, and it was beautifully illustrated. It was watercolors of an immaculate design, and there were signatures next to the designs of the sailors and the dates that they got the tattoos.
Yes.
That sounds like Akamatsu.
That was
Or the
Akamatsu.
other one,
no, it's not.
wasn't
No,
George
you're right.
on the
Burchett?
back wall.
Akamatsu
Okay.
did this.
Well, I'll recognize it if it's
usually
in here, but yeah, I have the slides of that, so.
Because in 1869, I think it was, the emperor, that was Japanese. They don't say.
Horichayo.
Huh?
Horichayo. I'm Emperor Horichayo, no?
Meiji.
Amazing.
When he went in as emperor at 18 years old, he asked his. He was 18 years old,
Right.
so he needed counselors there. So in meetings and everything else, he was a serious-minded guy. And the bamboo curtain had just been opened up by Admiral Perry.
Right.
So Japan would have been in isolation for thousands of years.
Yeah, long time.
So he asked his counselors, what does the Western world frown upon in our culture? And one of the things was tattooing. So he made tattooing forbidden to the Japanese people.
Right.
The Japanese tattoo artists could work on the round-eyed devil. That's us.
Yeah. Or the
But you
kings
couldn't-
of Europe.
So a lot of them, to survive, they had to leave the country. The first two tattoo artists here in San Francisco in 1872 were Japanese tattoo artists that had come up around through the Aleutian chain, Seattle, settled in San Francisco. And so they had to leave. This fellow over here that flashed, but he was in the Mediterranean before and through World War I. The Brits call it the 14-18 War. We was in it from 1816 to 1916 to 1918. We was in it for 2 years. The Brits were fighting that for 4 years. And he's down in the Mediterranean dealing with British sailors. So if you notice in that flash, it was somebody's name, the rank, the ship they're on, and the date that it was made on. And in some of them will be Malta or something like that. So it's like a running history that don't mean doodly-doo other than it just adds to it, sort of like for a tattoo history buff.
Yeah, so.
So tattoo's got a long goddamn history. It goes back way before recorded history.
Yeah.
Lyle, there's a lot of people and some want to ask questions. I know Nick York wants to ask a question here.
Oh, yes.
A Burchett
That's
question.
Mr. Question. That's what we
He's got one special
No, but
question.
he's an interesting guy. Yes, sir.
Whenever you first went over there to pick up the Burchett collection and you visited Leslie, was there any piece that he didn't want to let go of, that he had a special bond to?
Good question.
Yeah. His wife.
He was Leslie Burchett went to engineering school, some type of, I don't know what the hell kind of engineering it was, but then his father was so strong that he sort of held him captive and forced him into the tattoo business. And there's some Burchett machines, which has got the cast frame with the upright forward. So he did design some machines and built some machines. Because in this massive collection, I wound up getting all of that residue, which means the workshop. And the Brits had an unusual style. The Americans standardized their tattoo machine, which around World War I or immediately after standardized it. The Brits flopped around and there wasn't really mass communication in those days. They didn't have suppliers like Wagner and Wagner Waters and people like that. So there was equipment over there so varied.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for doorbells, they'd still been on it. Or all of us would just sit on because the twin coil electromagnetic tattoo machine today is nothing but a sophisticated doorbell.
If I can just say, when you say they had a standardized tattoo machine in America, this, because it's pre the internet anyway, a lot of English tattoo artists did make the doorbell tattoo machines because they had no tattooing addresses back then. It wasn't available. And people like Percy Waters, I mean, he could advertise on the USA side of things, you know, in engineering magazines or whatever that might be. But in England, it was only George Burchett who supplied, and he would have advertised in similar magazines like Exchange and Mart. But he was one person. If you didn't get that magazine, you didn't see them advertisements. People like Owen Jensen in the States and Percy Waters and Wagner and people like that, they were smart in what they were doing, but they were flooding it and what they would have been considered back then by tattoo artists who were comfortable and didn't want any competition. They would have been considered as an inevitable thorn in the side because they're educated people and they didn't want to do that, they wanted to keep it closed shut. So people in England who went into tattooing, and this is what Lyle likes about the English tattoo machines, is people in England didn't have the luxury or the knowledge or the connections to buy these tattoo suppliers in the States. So they were ingenious buggers really, because what they had to do, they took the doorbells and they made them work into a tattoo machine, and each tattoo artist who got into the profession, it would always be individual and unique and personal to them. And that is why Lyle likes the English stuff, because it's more ingenious, and it was a case of having to do that because there was no choice. And if you wanted to be a tattoo artist in England, and you were somebody in England, if you were a tattoo artist within your own circle, you deserve to be a tattoo artist because you'd gone through it, you had sacrificed that leg, and you were still standing. And I think that's what appeals to Lyle. It's the folk art side of things. Am I right in saying that?
Well,
No, go on then. Let me
I didn't hear what I said.
No, I'm saying.
Has anybody told you you have an accent?
I know, yeah. Did anybody understand that, by the way?
Yes.
Sorry about it. I know, I'm trying to keep the accent mellow.
You know that you're not doing a good job at doing it.
Well, I understand you. You understand me, so we
But I don't have an accent.
What to me? It's an American accent. Okay,
Now you
this guy
see
here,
my thought trainer, which is not
Lyle,
difficult.
this chap here is from Hamburg Museum. He's a tattoo historian and he's doing something on
Are you
Christian
the
Varley.
gentleman that sent me the books
Yes.
recently?
Yes. The thinkable.
And
The
I was
green one.
remiss and didn't thank you because I was so goddamn busy
Yeah,
putting this thing together.
leave that.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to ask? Or
Yeah, I
British
just want-
tattooing or
Yeah,
British or?
I just wondered actually. So you basically said that there was like hardly any exchange between British tattooists and American ones back then.
Yeah, no, what I mean, the American tattooists were more organised. They had little pamphlets and, you know, I mean, the best person really for, it comes in generations. The best one was Percy Waters, and then you jump from Percy Waters to someone like Owen Jensen, and then you go from Owen Jensen and then you'd skip another beat and you'd be in the 50s with Milton's Ice. These were all clever, smart,
Yeah.
professional spielers, and they knew how to dress up what they had, and they were really clever guys. In England, they didn't have that same break, but what they was involved in tattooing in another way. Like a lot of people seem to think, you know, the Percy Waters setup is all American, but it's not. A lot of the flash in the Percy Waters library, let's say, or their archive was drawn by a guy called Art Cale from Manchester. Now he was drawing all these traditional American designs for Percy Waters, and Percy Waters was just ramping them as his own, because he was a machine builder. He wasn't a flash drawer, he wasn't an artist, he was someone who was a smart business guy. He worked at the turn of the century with Wagner. Wagner, as you know, was as an immigrant, and they both get together, and there's some machines that people might be aware of, you know, in collections, and they look like Wagner's, but they're not stamped. They're known as unstamped Wagners. But the chances are Percy Waters and Wagner did that together, and then he moved on from there and made his own way, you know, into different circles as life goes on. But the thing is, Percy Waters, he was a smart businessman, but he wasn't a flash drawer. I mean, you'd have English photographs in his collection of, you know, things that people could buy to dress their tattoo bunnies up. And there'd be English stuff, and it'd be like, I don't know, Stella Grassman, Leafy Deefy, or whatever you want to call it, or you could have, I don't know, at the turn of the day you might have Una, another tattoo person, and it'd have Milton's Eye stamps on it, and then you'd come to England where there's Joseph Hartley, and he'd have it stamped on a Wagner one. So they were thieves, they were all robbing from each other and borrowing each other. You don't do that in the internet world today, because you know in an instant, hang on, that's not your work, that's my work. But then they did it. And some people say to me, how come Christian Varley has got photographs advertised that he tattooed Stella, even though she's an American? That would be because Christian Varley would have been friends with Wagner, so they would have corresponded and exchanged. I send you stuff, you send me stuff, and that's how the tattoo world was back then. It wasn't, nobody could ever find out really. The customers would just go in, they'd have a tattoo, and they'd think whatever the window was dressed up with were photographs, that he did that work, but that wasn't the case. And it's the same, even though I go, you know, I'm a bit long-winded, it's the same with Percy Waters. People thought that was true American flash. It wasn't, and I can put my life on it. that flash, the majority of that flash in Percy Waters is not American. It was drawn by a guy called Art Cale of Manchester. Now Art Cale was around the time of people like Burchett, people like Professor Brown, people like Ashton Taylor, people like
Jesse May.
Mickey Mouse.
yeah, Mickey Mouse. All these English guys who were big at the time, he was there with them, and Joseph Hartley. And, you know, they just used to exchange. I mean, Joseph Hartley was from the north of England. He wasn't from Bristol. He was, you know, Wigan. He was from Wigan. And then he moved to Bristol, and then he was a deep sea diver, and he, you know, he settled in Bristol. And
A deep sea diver?
Yeah, that's where you go in the water.
He got
not
the
beer.
bends and he went in the supply business.
So anyway, the point I was getting to, a lot of tattooists are just opportunity in the day were just thieves, and they were all sampling and taking from each other. But the Yanks were just as bad because they were taking it back as well. But you know, the smartest guys at the day were definitely Wagner, Percy Waters. Then it moved on, and then we had the English equivalents like the Burchett, and the lesser known ones like Alfred South of Cockspur Road, London. He patented the first brass tattoo machine in the 1890s. And then there's the other story of Samuel O'Reilly, who invented the first electric tattoo machine. But his cousin doesn't get a credit for it. On the American side, his cousin was Tom O'Reilly. He doesn't get a mention, he gets no credit whatsoever. But when you read early Victorian tattoo supplies in England, he's credited. Because it's gone over to the States, it's not important. So he's wiped out in the history. So this is why it's good to, for me and for Lyle, to keep finding, because history's forever reappearing and popping up, and you know, over here and that type of thing. And that's what happens with tattooing history, and that's what has happened with Percy Waters, with all this flash that he's claimed on his own and his big blue shins. Definitely Art Cale, and Art Cale had a son. Well, it was William Cale, and his son was called Art. And you look at these, not Tom Berg, Ben Corday cards of the tattooed ladies. That has been round to every tattooist of that period. I have one, and Lyle has one, of a Ben Corday card, and you have the one with the guy with the bowler hat on. That's William Cale. So they would have been friends. And William Cale lived in a place in Manchester called Arparay. And Joseph Hartley, by this time, was left Wigan, and he'd been living down Bristol in England. But if you look at the early pamphlets of Joseph Hartley, it'll say printed in Arparay. So this is how I put two and two together. Art Cale lived in Arparay. Joseph Hartley had his artwork printed in Arparay. Arparay had lots of printers and lots of, you know, post the Industrial Revolution. But you know, they had all these things going on, so they must have been connecting with each other. And Ben Corday was part of that, because Ben Corday came from a place called, well, his parents were born in Pendlebury, which is Salford, close to Manchester. I only know that information, but the full credit goes to Carmen from Queer for that, because she, you know, she does dig deep, and she's a very good historian. You know, all these great artists like Tom Berg and stuff like, they're all from the north of England. You got Tom Berg, you got this artist there who I think is Bob Devine, he's north of England, and then you've got Joseph Hartley, north of England, and you've got Art Cale, north of England, and all this talent was up north. And then, you know, you've got George Burchett. He was a great master of publicity and self-publicist, and he was so smart, but he got educated really from Sutherland MacDonald, who was also a northerner from Leeds. So a lot of it is in the north of England.
Why?
Sorry?
You must come from the north of England.
It does.
Why was there so much talent in the north? What was
There was a lot of travellers up north, gypsies and show people, more so than there was down south. So they would spiel and they would do anything to make a few quid. And it's just the way it is. Even George Bigmore. You see, the thing is, a lot of these northern artists, even though they're from the north, like all these big names, they settled in London because London was the place where you could make the money, unless you was in by a docks or you know, a boat, sailors coming and going. You'd go to London because that's where the big money was, and that's where a lot of the talent went to, you know, and that's why they went there. And George Bigmore was from a place up north called Dalton in Furness. It's right up north. And then you get other people like Prince Valor, further up north. He's in Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah, so it's just, I don't know why that is the case. All I can assume is, sorry, Kate, yeah.
Well, would north of England, would it have anything to do with the Picts?
With the what?
Because the Picts they were up
The
north,
Picts,
the
yes.
Picts,
The Picts,
and they
yeah.
had a culture of tattooing.
Well,
That's what they were called, the Picts?
yes, the Celts
So
and the
could
Picts
that
and all that.
kind of eased that? Would it have made
Well, I
it
don't
more
know.
familiar?
I'm not 100% sure. I can't answer that, and I won't pretend to know that. All I can tell you is what I know. Like I say, I don't know everything, but I'm in the top 2 in the world. So I don't know everything, but I will answer honestly, and I don't want to,
Yeah.
give any bullshit because history's been messed up as it is. A lot of people, up until recently, have anybody heard of Frank de Burgh? No?
What?
Frank de Burgh, you know about Frank de Burgh. Now,
Tattooed in San Francisco.
yes, he did. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Frank de Burgh is not an American, he's English, and he was born in Bristol in 1850, and he made the migration here with a lot of other people that were doing the same thing, like Ben Corday and all them other people, they came over here. And, like I said earlier on, tattooing history is very rich in England because we've been going longer, and so there's more opportunities there to find the history there. Any more questions for Lyle or myself?
Can you
Okay.
talk about the connection with the royalty? The royalty
Regarding
can you
George
talk-
Burchett or regarding Sutherland MacDonald, because Sutherland MacDonald had the advantage of tattooing royalty. He was in the right spots and he did things like, he was in the Navy and he had connections, and so yeah, but I mean, Burchett did that, but there was a little bit of envy there with George Burchett because George Burchett claimed to have tattooed, the King
Three
of England.
coronated kings.
Yeah, King of Denmark.
Denmark,
No?
You're doing a good
Oh,
job.
okay. Yeah, well, he tattooed four members of royal, so the King of Denmark and the King of England and Louis Ujimajar with his ex and the 111s that I can't pronounce next to him. But his biggest and most famous client would have been Horace Riddler. Horace Riddler was known as the Great Homie. The way that story goes, it's been passed down, and the way I got it from a tattoo artist called Jock in King's Cross in London. And he told Jock, King's Cross
Jock,
in
okay,
London.
right,
Yeah,
I
Big
know
Jock, yeah.
Jock.
I was talking to him maybe 25, 30 years ago. We were talking about Horace Riddler, the Great Homie. And he said, do you know the story behind that Rambo? I went, no, tell me. He said, well, what it was, he said he was a very wealthy man because his family was wealthy and he got a great inheritance, and then he went and blew it all on fast living, fast women and all the shit of the day. Then he was penniless. Then he met his wife and met, and he said, what are we going to do? Anyway, cut the story short, he said, I've become a showman. So he went to George Burchett, and you probably know about the letter situation. He wouldn't do it unless, he give a formal, a proper letter saying, yeah, you're okay to tattoo with full body as a zebra man. But away from that, he'd go for his tattoo sessions and he'd have a little bit done and say, can you put a bit here, please, George, and a bit there, and there's some missing on my nose, and black this up, and then he'd say, okay, so he'd do the job, and then, he'd do something like, he said, I'm not brought anyone, Lyle's good at this one. Oh, I've not got any money on me, I've no American doc. So anyway, she knows. So anyway, he would say, I've got no money on me, can I pay you next time? And George Burchett would say, there he goes, the Great Homie. And that's
Oh my God.
Yeah. So Horace so that's what I've been told, but who knows, but it's possible. It could be because of that. There he goes, the Great Homie. Now the Great Homie, he was one of Burchett's, if not Burchett's most famous clients. And when he was fully transformed, he went to Ripley's, believe it or not, and he tattooed him. He went to Ripley's, believe it or not, as the tattooed man. But as times were moving on, things were moving on, and he wasn't as outrageous as he thought. Just having tattooed stripes all over him just wasn't enough. So then he had his teeth filed down to a fang that he pierced, a bit like Nick, he had all these piercings done. Because he needed to stay ahead of the game. And there was one time that he was travelling with a circus and he nearly died because he wasn't treated with respect, even though he was well paid as an entertainer. He wasn't treated with respect, and he had to travel on the same coach as, you know, the Lions, for example, and you know, there'd be a board there, and he nearly died, and he was hallucinating, and he died from the Lions urine. It was so potent, it was getting to him and poisoning him. So they realised, oh, you know, for two reasons, we can't have him travelling with the Lions. He's a star attraction, and he's no good to us dead. Come and see the great dead home, it doesn't work. So anyway, he recovered, he got better and stuff like that, and then he went on to perform again. I mean, he performed in London's Olympian. He also appeared in the Bellevue in Manchester. That was a big circus showground in 1946, 1947 show period. He appeared there as the Great Omi. I met a magician about 10 years ago, and he was called Bob Omi, Magic Tricks. And I said, that's an interesting name. I said, what made you have a name called Bob Omi? And he said, well, when I was 10 years of age, he said, my father took me to Bellevue Showground in Manchester. He said, and he was a freaky guy there. He said, and he had all these fangs and zebra marks. He said, and as a child I shit myself. He said, it gave me nightmares. And I thought, what a great Omi. The name, the Great Omi. He said, so, because I'm a magician, come see the Great Malvino or the Great Ujabajar. He said, I thought, Bob Omi. He said, because I thought nobody knew about it. In my time now, who would know about the Omi? I said, I do. He went, I know you do. So anyway, that's how that came
Omi
about.
means granny, you know that. So in Germany, they all the great Omi.
Yeah.
They all have one.
That, well, there you go, then. So anyway, that's getting back to Great Omi, the English one. He came to a time in his life when he was too old to perform and do what he needed to. Even though it was in his art, just like it was with someone like, I don't know. And if it's all you know in your life is to perform, it come to a time when he couldn't perform. He was old and he didn't look as appealing. He just looked like a sad figure, really. And it's quite sad because his tattoos were drooping and he was old and frail. So he retired, we've all met, to the countryside in a little caravan because he wanted to shy away. Because if he used to go shopping or if he used to walk around where he lived, he used to cover himself up. He had what we call a balaclava. I don't know what you call them here. And he used to walk around with this, you see. So anyway, cut the story short, he died in 1969 in a caravan and he just lost his marbles. He went a little bit insane. Sad story, but that's it, And getting back to other English tattooists of the day, there was one in particular called William Thomas. Now William Thomas was a very talented artist and he would set up at the fairs and at the carnivals, and he'd have these beautiful canvas backdrops, similar to what Edith Burchett is like there, but it'd be like treble the size of that, and it'd be around a little hand-shift made tent or marquee, and it was called William Thomas. Now, these painting canvas banners have survived, and they're in Lyle Tuttle's collection. I don't know if you know that they were William Thomas. You know the tattooed lady, and yeah. Okay, over to
W.L. Thomas is William Thomas.
Yeah. So maybe you want to talk about how they came about, or do you want me to
That's what we're talking about.
William Thomas, you've got the canvas drops.
We're talking about, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's all part of the English thing with Burchett, you say.
Yeah, no. Well, I know.
Okay, well, the banners that Lyle has in his collection are by Thomas. They're absolutely so important. I would value them more important than the Burchett stuff.
Are you talking about the banners that I have?
Yes, the canvas ones, because they're unique, they're hand painted, the man's done that.
The original artist's name and what he's owned.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'm not sure, I do know where you get them from, but it's not my place to say how you came across them. But the thing is,
well,
these
it was legal.
Yeah, it's important.
But I did slip them out of merry old England to the colonies.
I know you did, yeah, I know. Anyway, these banners, the point I was getting to is these are super special. They're very rare. They're so appealing. And if you think the Edith Burchett ones are attractive, these will blow your mind. They're absolutely gorgeous. Lyle owns them. They're in his collection. And the reason I say they're more special than the Burchett stuff is because the Burchett stuff is plentiful, and people know about that. The William Thomas has not been discovered yet, so this is just another facet in his collection that has yet to emerge, if it does emerge. But this is it. It's just these are the English artists. You know, there's lots of them. I have some in my collection of unknown artists. Professor Brown. Professor Brown's an English artist, and his flash was absolutely beautiful. I mean, I love Burchett, don't get me wrong, but Burchett's flash is not as good as Professor Brown's. I think maybe Nick York is slightly aware of Professor Brown. I was lucky enough to purchase 3 handbooks and a big old poster. Prices from $1, which is about, I don't know, 5 cents or something.
Was that old junk we was looking at?
That's the old shit, yeah.
Now you know.
So anyway, story short, you know, there's lots of history still out there that is still turning up. Any questions?
Could you tell us more about this J. Fisher piece? It's the only example of his artwork I've ever seen.
Well, I have one by J. Fisher, but mine's a W. Fisher. Still ongoing research is happening with this, because if you look at it, it's got a style, you know, that you could connect with a few artists of the day. Like these areas, well, these Bob Divine, what I think of Bob Divine. If you look underneath, the ones to the right are not Burchett's. They're probably, in my professional opinion, James Mitchell. James Mitchell tattooed in Great Yarmouth, and when he retired, his sons took over, and they were known as the Mitchell brothers in Great Yarmouth, and it was just something they did. And when James was 82 and he was about to retire, he said, I've got some old tattooed stuff, would you be interested in buying it for your museum? Obviously, as an historian, I jumped at the chance and I bought everything he had. And this is the only reason why I know they could be James Mitchell, because they marry up, everything's similar. So there you go. Anything else?
Did you ever hear about the Great Omi's Act? What he did when he was in his caravan?
Yes, he would give a spiel and he would talk about being captured by savages and being forcibly tattooed, and just the usual thing that all the people of that day would do. Like Prince Constantine would do the same thing, Frank de Burgh would do the same thing. He would say we were forcibly tattooed, and the women of the day, like they were more highly paid than the men, because you see a tattooed lady. Oh, yeah, it's like, whoa, it was an excuse for the pervs to see the tits and things. So, you know, they would get more, and it used to cause a little bit of friction because the men had to undergo the same pain anyway, because it was very painful in days to get tattoos. There was no capacitors on your machines. You know, if you saw a blue light, and that's what you're getting, you felt that pain, you know. So, they went through the same shit as the women. A little bit of jealousy because the women got higher paid because they were prettier and they were more scarce and they were more appealing and they were more excited. Come and see the tattoo lady. It's just something that's unique.
When I was over there with Jeff, I met a guy who saw the Great Omi perform, and
Yeah.
he told me about that act.